All right, all right. This is sort of the pilot episode of the Restorative Justice Report, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Joel Segal. My name is Dr. Willie J. Keaton Jr., and I am um, the Executive Director of Restorative Justice CLT. And Joel Segal, why don't you introduce yourself and tell them a little
Sure.
bit about you?
It's an honor to be with you, Dr. Keaton.
Yes, sir.
Distinguished professor at Queens College, ED of Restorative Justice CLT. I'm a proud board member.
Yes.
Let's see. I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. Former senior legislative assistant to Representative John Conyers, the legendary, iconic civil rights member of Congress. And I was the founder of the Universal Healthcare Movement and the Global AIDS Movement in 2000. Wrote the bill Medicare for All that Bernie ran on. Been an activist for 40 years, live in Charlotte now, and executive director of the Justice Action Mobilization Network. We work on climate change and ending poverty.
Wonderful. Now, me and you, we get an opportunity to talk a lot, and sometimes we could be on the phone for hours, just talking, and our conversations be so rich, and I always enjoy them. And so I figured, why not, sort of take these conversations and provide a window into, some of the things that we're thinking about as restorative justice. And I
Sure.
thought, why not start our time by sharing with us, as a person who worked on the Capitol tell us about, how long you worked there, and then talk about your thoughts, because we were having a meeting when the insurrection was taking
Right.
place. I think it was you, Rodney Sadler,
Yes.
Reverend Shipman, and Jincy Baker. We were talking about rap trackers and things. And as we were discussing and organizing a planning meeting, this was taking place, and I had it on my TV. You had it on your TV, but you seemed to be literally, your breath was taken away, and you kept saying, "Wow, I used to work there." So just offer your perspective on what you was thinking.
Well, look, it's a great question. Thank you for asking. Yes, I did work there for 13 years, and I was always going to the Capitol because Mr. Conyers would go vote, and I had to bring the vote sheet, or I was a speech writer, right? So I have to bring his speeches to the floor, and then the staff would wait in a room, and separate, right, from the Capitol. And there's a very good chance that if I had been there, I would have been caught up in that. And so I wanted to cry.
Yeah, I heard it in your voice.
Yeah, I wanted to cry because I do love democracy. It's very flawed. I did love the Congress. I'll be honest with you. I love the Congressional Black Caucus. I was very close to Nancy Pelosi, and seeing this institution that I venerate, that I cherish, I never thought I would see the day of a riot and an insurrection by white nationalists. I just didn't see it. And immediately I knew that it was done with paramilitary precision, that had to been planned and funded from high up.
Okay.
That I knew.
Yeah, and it's funny because I remember a year ago when we were talking about that, and you were the first person who talked to me with passion about some of these white nationalist groups, and that they needed to be classified as terrorist organizations.
Yes.
Can you just give us a little bit of thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the insurrectionists were white nationalists. They were carrying Confederate flags. They used the N-word over and over again. That's what they called it, the black police officers. They had T-shirts that said 6MNE, 6 million, not enough. So if you look at the white nationalist movement and the paramilitary movement, they've been waiting for a race war for decades. Well, guess what? they got their race war because we have a black vice president, and that's terrifying to racists.
Yes.
And we had a president who I called the Imperial Wizard of the KKK.
Mm.
The first, he was the founder of the birther movement, said that our first black president was not an American.
Okay.
So, built walls to keep brown people out from Central America, put children in concentration camps, called black inner cities rat infested, right?
So in your opinion, all of these things were sort of stroking this racial tension that led up to what happened on January 6th.
Yeah, if you read Michael Cohen's biography called Disloyal, he just says that the conscious campaign strategy of Trump was a white nationalist populist strategy. We're going to play on racism and then economic populism. Racism, ban Muslims, right? Ban immigrants, because Steve Bannon, the editor of Breitbart, a former editor, he knew his audience, and he knew that if he played on nativism and economic populism, then Trump could win. Well, that was the Trump card.
Okay.
The pun was intended.
And the Trump card, I got you.
Yeah, the white nationalism, which has been here for 400 years, but professionalized and well funded since Trump became president. When Trump basically said, "You're my base, I love you, and I'll support you." He never had for example, he never had the attorney general. He never had Barr investigate the Klan. He never had Barr investigate white nationalist paramilitary groups. And the reason why I am running both North Carolina General Assembly legislation and federal legislation to ban the Klan and paramilitary groups is because how many more years of terror do we have to go through? How many more of your relatives that Wilmington, North Carolina?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I remember I think we had this conversation when the two police officers were overheard talking to each other, and they were using racial epithets, and they also once said at that time that they can't wait until the race war breaks out because it's going to set blacks back another 30 to 40 years. And so that was months ago. And I think that was sort of the chatter that had been taking place all of this time, which is very, very profound, that it was sort of building up. And the dog whistles that people talk about that the president was engaging in. And I just saw, let me just read you this quote. And I want to actually, I saw this on CNN. There's a gentleman named Ron Brownstein.
No.
Brownstein. You know who he is? I figured you would.
Yeah.
He was on TV, and he has a new book out. And before I get to the quote, I want to tell you not a little story, but about 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, I was in a class, and we took a trip to Gettysburg, and this was a doctorate level class, and the professor, his thinking then and what he was presenting to us was that in many ways we are still fighting the Civil War.
Absolutely.
And he took us on this field trip to Gettysburg, and we had this conversation and all of the monuments that were to Confederate soldiers who had perished from North Carolina and from South Carolina. And when he said that, I didn't get it at the time. I thought it was sort of maybe hyperbole, maybe I was, but this guy, Ron Brownstein, he said today, Trump is leaving the most divided country since the Civil War. And he said that today. When you hear a comment like that? What's your thoughts?
My first week of working for Congressman Conyers, someone called on the phone and called Mr. Conyers the N-word.
Mm.
And I've never worked in a congressional office, so I said, can you give me the name and number of your trailer park? You know, that was my response, right?
Yeah.
And I remember Mr. Conyers' chief of staff, who's an African American, said, Joel, I understand why you said that, but you can't do that in a congressional office. I said, they just called Mr. Conyers an N-word. There wasn't a week that didn't go by where I had to read the mail. So racist epithets at Mr. Conyers. And I remember Glenn Beck had a rally. Remember Glenn Beck, Fox News?
Mm-hmm.
Thousands streaming to the Washington Monument. And I asked this guy, why are you going to this rally? And let me tell you what he said. To make sure that that N stays out of the White House. Now, our conversations are going to be completely honest. We got to be completely honest. There is a virulent virus in this country, just like COVID-19, called racism.
Right.
Right. And progressives, especially progressive white people, don't want to really, really think this through as hard as they need to, because it's so foreign to them. They're like, well, how could people hate black and brown people and Jewish people?
Yeah.
Well, easily, we were founded on slavery. We were founded on Jim Crow, and then legal apartheid until the 65 Voting Rights Act, right? So all Trump did was bring out that evil, racist, anti-Semitic millions of Americans, and he legitimized them by saying, it's okay to come out now. President Trump's going to protect you. And they came out, and look what the result was. Destruction of the Capitol.
It's like a riptide. It's like if you look out into the waters, it could look very calm. It could look like a post-racial society, those kind of words we use, a post-racial society. But underneath is, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Underneath that, this calm on the surface, there was this current, there was a riptide there that had been developing. And it came to the surface in full force on, what in the Christian world is called the Day of Epiphany, January 6th. Now, if if his assertion is correct, that this is the most divided the country has been since the Civil War, what is the first step?
It's a great question. I will challenge him. It's the most united and divided we've ever been. Because if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, that looked like SNCC from the 1960s, from the Civil Rights Freedom Summer. We have never seen multiracial protest that in our life. That's one of the reasons why the white nationalists, they get scared of that. They don't like, my battery's running low. I'm so sorry. Hold on.
That's all right.
Look, the white nationalists they're smart. They saw a Black Lives Matter movement, which was completely multiracial. That scared them.
A rainbow coalition in many ways.
A rainbow coalition, right. So those Confederate flags that you saw is to keep America white again. And that is their narrative. We want America to be white. We don't know why we want it white, but we just do. Hatred is universal. Go to Rwanda. Remember the Hutus and the Tutsis? Remember the genocide? Northern Ireland, it was the Catholics versus the Protestants. So hatred and racism, it just isn't here in America.
I see.
It's biblical. Evil, in the Torah, it says we're born with the inclination to do good and evil.
That's right.
And history and the Bible are replete with the conflict of good versus evil. We just
Yeah.
saw it last week where evil
Yes.
ransacked the White House. Why? They are still fighting the Civil War on some level. However, the question becomes, how many real radical extremists are there in America versus, let's say, moderates? And
Mm.
to me, here's the answer. A zero tolerance for domestic terrorists. Do you think we would accept ISIS and let them organize and have websites? I don't think so. Do you think we would allow a modern Black Panther movement if the Black Panther movement said, we don't believe the vote, we think it was stolen. We're going to go take our guns like Bobby Seale and Huey Newton did. You think that would be permitted? No, they would have been shot down like dogs, right? So the Civil War is this deeper mindset. And I think, what do we got to do now? It's what I'm organizing at George Mason University and several universities, Yale, across the country. I'm working on a symposium with the president of the Atlanta NAACP, Ray McClendon. And it's called, I'd like to do it at Queens and Restorative Justice CLT, universities across the country. We're going to hold symposiums at universities across the country on how to save our democracy. So it'll be,
Okay.
half will be fighting voter suppression and racist gerrymandering or Jim Crow gerrymandering, the racist electoral college. The other is, what are we going to do with the rise of the organized radical alt-right, the Trump secessionists? Because I'll close by saying, what you saw at the Capitol, Dr. Keaton,
Yes, sir.
was what happens when racism, both institutional and what I call hate racism, goes unchecked, untalked about, or not talked about. And this is what happens when Dylan Roof goes to a Black church in Charleston and kills congregants who were just praying.
Right.
What happened after that? The police took him for a hamburger. But I'm just saying,
we have
to have a serious conversation about what are we going to do about, we are in fascism and authoritarianism. We got to outlaw these groups. We got to say no to your organizing, no to your websites.
Yes.
No to your, you can't tweet, you can't organize, because if you do, you're going to go to prison for 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have now all across the United States, what the government is doing to stop the progress of gang activity is that they're sort of using these racketeering charges and conspiracy, and I think these are the same kind of methods that's needed to deal with with white nationalists and homegrown terrorism. But we're going to stop there. This is you said something that I want us to leave as a lingering question, which is how to save our democracy. And you talked about the symposiums, and when we come back, the next time we'll come back and have our conversation, we'll have another conversation around that. And the question will be, how will we save our democracy? Because the we of that is what's important there. How will we? It's not going to be one group. It's not going to be the rich. It's not going to be the poor. It's not going to be the upper class. It's not going to be the middle. How do we, Black, white individuals who love justice, how are we going to save our democracy? Thank you. And again, this is our pilot introduction, a pilot program. We're gonna, again, me and Brother Joel, we've been having these conversations for just hours. We'll talk, and we're happy to be born on the same day, September the 12th, and we just have this kindred spirit. And so we're going to be talking. We're going to be interviewing people, and this is the Restorative Justice Report, and we look forward to bringing you something valuable and informative in our next discussion. Joe, you want to say something?
No, thank you, Dr. Keaton. I'm proud of you. I think you're one of the greatest scholars and mentors that I've had in years. And I look forward to you speaking at these national symposiums because your groundbreaking scholarship on institutional racism and upward mobility just was so important for me in terms of the work that I do, both in Congress or the North Carolina General Assembly. So plus, you're so cool to talk to. and
yeah.
I think it's time that we have to be completely honest now. We can't
Yes.
sugarcoat racism and institutional racism and white nationalism and say, oh, the First Amendment protects them. There's a slippery slope if you,
Okay.
no, there's no slippery slope. Go tell that to the 5 people who were dead in D.C.
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
rioters. Go talk about some
There
slippery
you
slope
go.
to that police
And
officer's family.
that's gonna sort of a prelude to what we're going to talk about next, which is how to save our democracy. And I guess the first step is to have honest conversations, honest and authentic conversations. And that's all that we want to try to do in these times that we meet and discuss. We want to have honest conversations because I believe in my heart that what is needed is authenticity, truth-telling, not necessarily naming and blaming, but truth-telling, honest truth. And and sometimes we just have to let the chips fall where they may, but we have to begin to tell the truth. I think that is what sort of perfectly describes Trumpism. Is
Right.
this idea that truth doesn't exist? So you could lose an election by 7 million votes and still declare you won by a landslide because there is no truth. But
There's a
what we're saying,
crisis. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Now, there's a crisis in who people believe in. That's the crisis we're in, because people are believing in Rush Limbaugh and Fox News and these far right wing radio stations. And Goebbels and Himmler, the propagandists for Hitler, used to say a lie over and over again, and people will believe it.
Wow.
The Jews were responsible for the Depression. That was the lie they told over and over again.
Wow.
Say a lie over and over again. Black people don't work. Hispanics are rapists. Jewish people run, the economy. And
Yeah.
I think we have to be solutionaries, because the solutionary, that's what I try to be, is a solutionary. I try to come up with solutions, that I believe, are just and moral and godly, that are what's best for the majority of the people, what's best for humanity. But if a lot of people do a lot of analyzing. I think this show is very important. We're going to analyze, educate, and then we're going to, come up with solutions and see if we can get those solutions into law. A lot of times you got one or the other, organizing versus, discussion. You got to do both.
I agree. Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
I look forward to our time again where we have another great discussion. All right, till next time.
Honored to be with you.